So it turns out Shanks had a strange looking mark on his arm. And it's probably same one the Gods Knights were talking about. But now, of course, that left arm of his is gone. Just like how Jinbei formally cuts ties with Big Mom's crew in the respectful way, you could see Shanks' decision to lose his arm to protect Luffy as his way of drawing the line. A clear break from the world government. I actually go into more detail about that in this video here, so if you're curious, definitely check it out. Alright, so today I'll be breaking down chapter 1152 based on the Japanese version, and trust me, when you read it in Japanese, like this Shonen Jump, especially the stuff about Harald, you'll start to notice some pretty interesting connections. So in this chapter, we saw that Shanks visited Elbaf 40 years ago, but what really stands out is the mark on his left arm. It's the same kind of symbol we've seen on the uniform of Somars and Killingam. Now, we don't know for sure if it's the same mark that let them pass through the abyss, as Killingam mentioned. But considering Shanks lived in Mariejois for a while, there's a strong chance it is. What's interesting is that, in the flashback with Buggy and Shanks, when Shanks was wearing short sleeves, you can clearly see his left elbow. And there's no mark. So that pretty much confirms he got it after living in Mariejois. But like I've said in the earlier videos, I really believe Shanks' ultimate goal is to fulfill Roger's dream, to flip the world upside down. If that wasn't the case, he probably wouldn't have gone out of his way to reconnect with Rayleigh and Gaban. What's even more fascinating is that Shanks casually tells Gaban about having lived in Mariejois, and Gaban calls him Unmei no Ko, the child of fate. Someone actually asked me about this line. In the original Japanese, it's in the present tense. That choice of wording feels intentional. It's probably a metaphor. Even though Shanks has blood of the Celestial Dragon, fate tossed him onto the private kingship, and that changed everything. It's like his life has always been at the mercy of destiny. Remember that the scene in the Oden flashback, when Oden sees Shanks crying after Rogers whispers something to him? That might have been the moment Roger told Shanks the truth about where he really came from. That would explain a lot. After that, it looks like Shanks returned to Mariejois, and from the way he speaks now, it's clear he spent a decent amount of time living there. Which makes you wonder, how would someone like Shanks, who grew up down in the lower world, accept it in Mariejois? Well, it's probably because of his strength as a figureland, or maybe because the world government saw value in him, like using him to get information out of Roger, who knew everything about the world. In other words, they had something to gain from letting him back in. Oh, and Shanks probably stuffed himself with lobster around that time. That's likely how it ended up becoming favorite food. And by the way, I put together a timeline of Shanks' life, including an analysis of the time he spent living in Mariejois, and shared it with my Patreon members. So come have a read. Just a heads up though, I limit the number of new members each month, so don't miss your chance. Anyway, of course the government must have been suspicious of him since he is held with Roger, so in order to prove his loyalty and gain their trust, maybe Shanks let them brand that mark on his arm, as a kind of pledge. After all, the God Knights clearly serve directly under Imu, so it wouldn't be surprising if Shanks had to do the same. So why would he go back to Mariejois in the first place? I think it's because to carry out Roger's will, to turn the world upside down. Shanks needed to understand things from the world government perspective too. It's the same kind of thing Kuzan is doing now. Remember what he told Smoker at Punk Hazard? There are things I can do without being in the Marines, and things I can only see because I'm no longer part of it. And he joined Blackbeard's crew not because he's evil, but because he has own justice. And he believes this is the best way to carry it out. If you are curious, check out this video on the Dawn Dusk channel, especially Kuzan's segment. I go into more detail there. So just like Kuzan, Shanks used his Celestial Dragon's bloodline to go undercover, in a sense to get closer to the heart of the enemy and figure out how to realize Roger's dream. And I think the key to that dream might just be the Hito no Mi model Nika. One of my earlier videos, I talked about the idea that legendary devil fruits passed down in Elbaf might actually be the Hito no Mi model Nika. Here's why I think that. The incident where Harald was killed happened 14 years ago, and just years after that, we get the event where Shanks attacked the world government escort ship. What's strange is that, originally in the Weekly Shonen Jump release, that Shanks incident was said to have happened 12 years ago. But when the official volume came out, it was quietly corrected to 13 years ago. And then, the year after that, 12 years ago, Luffy ends up eating that devil fruit. With that timeline in mind, I don't think it's coincidence. These events are way too connected for it all to be unrelated. It makes you wonder. Was the Hito no Mi model Nika actually kept in the Elbaf treasure vault up until 14 years ago? Now, one of the members of Giant Warrior Pirates did say that Loki ate a devil fruit. But considering that event, the story of Loki killing Harald must have been twisted and passed down incorrectly. We can't really be sure if Loki actually ate the legendary devil fruit or not. And let's not forget, back then, Shanks might still have the ties to the God's Knights. If that's the case, he could be had access to top secret intel, like the fact that Gomu Gomu no Mi was on the Who's Who's escort ship, which would explain how he was able to target that ship so precisely. Alright, let's take a closer look at what happened in Elbaf 14 years ago. Gaban mentioned that he sensed something strange coming from the castle at that time. He said, "I felt some abnormal haki coming from the castle that day." More recently, when he sensed Im's haki, he reacted with, "Oi oi, kono haki." Now in Japanese, that kind of reaction, "oi oi," isn't just surprise. It can also be used when something happens that brings back memories of something horrible or traumatic from the past. So the way he said it could suggest he's felt this kind of haki before, which might link directly back to what he felt 14 years ago. That means it's totally possible that Harald, just like Gunko now, was being controlled by Im's power back then, especially considering Shanks mentioned meeting Harald at Mariejois, and we know Harald has tied to God's Knights, so yeah, there's a strong chance Harald was under Im's influence too. As for whether Harald was really loyal to the world government from the start, or if he was doing what he did for the sake of Elbaf, that part's still unclear. And here's an extra layer of fun for anyone who understands Japanese. There's a bit of wordplay or nuance coming up that adds another twist to the story. There's a theory that Harald breaking off his own home might have been his way of resisting Im's control. Imu used an ability called Domi Reverse to turn Dory and Brogy into demonic versions of themselves, and then even transform the giants caught between them too. Like I mentioned in the last video, the move follows the rule of the game Othello. And in Othello, one of the key strategies to winning is taking the corners. In Japanese, we literally call that move kado wo toru, taking the corners. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Kanji for corner, this kanji, can be read two ways. When you read it as kado, as I said, it means a physical corner, like in Othello. But in exact same kanji can also be read as tsuno, which means horn. So when we pronounce this kanji, tsuno, it means horn, and kado, it means corner. So taking the corner, kado wo toru, in Othello becomes a wordplay for taking the horn, tsuno wo toru. And maybe that's a hidden key. If the reverse works an Othello game, then removing one's horn, in this case, tsuno, literally tsuno wo toru, could be the secret way to break Im's control. Harald might have known this. Maybe at some point, when he was being brainwashed by Imu, he broke off his horn to break free. That could be why he didn't have horns later on. And 14 years ago, since he no longer has his horn, maybe he lost control again, and had to order the soldiers to stab him to stop himself from hurting their soldiers. That's pretty wild. And at the end of the chapter 1152, we see flashback to 109 years ago when Harald went on a rampage. And honestly, one of the first things that jumped out at me was how similar the architecture of that kingdom looked, especially the rooftops, to the island where Kuzan and Blackbeard met about a year ago in the New World. That island was described back then as a certain island, not a certain kingdom, and the fact that the pirate like Blackbeard could just casually be there gave off the vibe that the place was lawless. So now I'm wondering, maybe that lawless atmosphere is because Harald destroyed that kingdom 109 years ago. Also, during that scene, Harald is called a kuzu, basically a scumbag or piece of trash. In Japanese, kuzu is used for people who do stuff that's seriously unethical or just downright hopeless. You might say it jokingly with friends, but when it's used seriously, it means someone really beyond help. In One Piece, the most famous example is probably Caesar Clown. Even though he was technically just following orders from Big Mom or world government, he still experimented on children, gave them drugs to force their growth, and created poison gas that tortures the mink tribe. That's why Nami straight up called him Kuzu. Now, looking at Kuzu version of Harald, he actually reminds me a bit of one of the numbers, Imbi. It makes you wonder if Imbi was possibly created using the genes of Harald or Loki's ancestors' bloodline. That theory is not too wild when you notice that they both have two horns, forward facing horns, and that Imbi's horn color even matches Loki's hair. And then there's his laugh. He goes, bara ha 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 ha. You know how Kaido laughs like wololololololo, which ties into the wo no mi, and Blackbeard goes gu la 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 la, matching his gura gura no mi. Well, maybe there's something going on with bara, because he laughs like bara ha 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 here too. In Japanese, bara literally means rose, and think about Soma's ability. It's thorn-based, and the Japanese word for thorn is ibara. And of course, there's everyone's favorite character, Buggy, with the bara bara no mi. Now, we still don't know if Harald actually had a rose-related power, or even bara bara no mi specifically, but there's enough of pattern here that it's worth keeping an eye on. Might be something. Now, this whole thing with Harald 14 years ago really raises a big question. How did someone like him end up working with world government? Personally, I think there must have been someone, a key person, who totally changed his worldview after that rampage. Maybe someone who taught him of importance of peace, or maybe someone dear to him got captured by the world government, forcing him to cooperate for their sake. We'll just have to wait and see how that plays out in the upcoming chapters. Now, let's wrap up by looking at the narrator's final lines. There was a time when, if you asked anyone across the world seas what they feared the most in this world, they'd all answer the same thing, the giant warrior pirate. And during that same era, ships sailing from the kingdom known as Elbaf carried with them an even deeper layer of fear. So it wasn't just a giant warrior pirate. Harald himself sailed aboard royal ships and spread terror across the world. And one big reason for that, as Yaru once hinted, is that Harald may have been trying to become a new god of destruction, Nika. That theory lines up with how he shouted things like, "So who's the real god, huh?" Basically trying to make people say it out loud. And you notice the narration keeps coming back to the one word over and over. Fear. This theme of fear has been a huge focus ever since the Elbaf arc began. Killingham's Muma was born out of fear. Mosako's traumatic experience with fear was highlighted too. And whether it came from Gunko herself or was being channeled through Imu, when Somas asked her what he feared the most, she answered, Nika. That clearly shows that Nika, as the god of destruction, was seen as the source of terror. In fact, even in Hali, people say Nika appears when the world is about to end. Interestingly, this connection between fear and Nika, the sun god, is hinted at in the lyrics of Binks no Sake. 臆病を風に吹かれや最後明日の朝日がないじゃなし Just cause you let the wind of fear knock you down doesn't mean the sun won't rise tomorrow. Nika has been interpreted in all kinds of ways, the god of destruction, the god of liberation, or the god of laughter. But either way, the sun still rises. No matter how the world chooses to interrupt Nika, the next era will always bring a new perspective. In other words, Nika's arrival wipes the slate clean so the world can be repainted with the fresh colors. That might just be the hidden theme behind all of this. And by the way, in another video, I talked about how the essence of Conqueror's Haki is also tied to fear. So if you are curious, definitely check that out as a follow-up to this one. Oh, by the way, the volume 112 One Piece is coming out very soon. Once it's out, I'll be breaking down the differences from the Shonen Jump version and also going over Oda Sensei's comments in detail. As for the SBS section, yeah, that's tend to get leaked online, so by the time I talked about it, its info might already feel a bit stale. And in fact, do you remember the last video ended up overlapping with some leak content, and of course some annoying people had to point that out, but just so we are clear. Sometimes I connect it to the published industry and occasionally submit work, so I don't share or spread anything before the official release. Even so, I've still managed to keep this channel going, and that's all thanks to your support. So seriously, thank you. I'll keep working hard to make videos and content that are actually worth your time, likes, and comments. There's still a lot I didn't get to cover in this video, so I'll be posting a more in-depth Japanese breakdown on my page, and of course I'll be uploading more video on Dawn Dusk too. Also, if you are interested in private Japanese lesson and translation work, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or email. Alright, see you in the next video.